Hi, this is Ruthie,
Richard,
Brody, and Anderson from Buckner, Kentucky.
and you're listening to Scandal Water,
where the tea is hot and the conversation lively.
Your hosts, Candy
And Ashley
will discuss a peculiar story somehow related to the entertainment industry. This podcast might not change the world, but it just might satisfy your thirst for an intriguing tale.
oh, it's that time of day. Tune in and hear what the ladies say. It's time to bend your ear when the silver screen appears. Stories about the stage and screen and everything in between. So come on and join the fun. The curtain opens in 3, 2, 1. Stories and scandal water. It's where you need to be. Stories and scandal water. Let's pour you a cup of tea.
Good morning, Ashley.
Good morning.
We are ready to start a new theme today.
Yes, we
and I
are.
am super excited about this.
Me too.
In fact, we are going to be talking about something that is pretty iconic and has been around for 55 years. 55 years.
That's a long time.
And what we're going to be talking about, guys, is Scooby-Doo.
Scooby-Dooby-Doo.
Ashley, what's your background with Scooby-Doo? Are you a fan? Have
I am
you
a fan.
watched?
Yes, I am not. You know who I'm not a fan of?
Ooh.
Scrappy Doo.
Thank you. That's my next
Scrappy
question.
Doo.
We're going to talk about that.
Shoot.
First, tell me about Scooby.
Scooby's.
Okay.
I can identify with Scooby because I too will do things for a snack. You bring me a Dr. Pepper every recording and I sit down with you and I'm like, yes, Candy, let's talk. So I can be persuaded. Like good brownie, Dr. Pepper, here we go. No, I love him. And he also frightened of many things.
Yes, yes.
I feel you, Scoobs. I feel you.
Relate. I can.
That.
I loved Scooby-Doo. Now, mind you, and we're going to talk about this, of course, there are many different iterations, and there are some that I love more than others. But I think the original,
the OG.
the mystery-solving group, that's what I loved.
Mystery
when there was
Machine.
a little bit of fear,
Yeah.
but there was suspense and there was mystery.
They would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you kids.
Yes, I really loved that version of it.
I did
that
too.
format of it.
Yes.
Yes. But that literally was my next question.
Scrappy
In fact,
Doo.
I listed it this way. Here's the polarizing question. Here's the controversy. I agree with you. I did not like Scrappy Doo at
No.
all. Let's talk about why.
I don't even remember why. I just remember a general feeling of dislike and disdain and just like, who's this kid? What was he? His nephew? Who
Yes,
was this?
Yes.
Who did
nephew.
he think he was?
Well, and
Coming
it's
in
so-
here, bossing everybody around.
And that's funny because let's see if you agree with me on this. I feel like I'm probably the one that's maybe different on this, the exception, but I have often disliked the characters that other people have liked. For
Really?
example, Sylvester and Tweety, get that bird. Like,
Eat him up.
yes, I mean, I have Roadrunner and the Coyote.
Yeah.
Like, I get a little annoyed with the ones
Yeah.
that are always
He's
right
mean.
and kind of annoying.
Yeah.
Like, I found them a little annoying.
Oh, yeah.
And so Scrappy Doo was beyond annoying to me.
Yeah.
Like,
Was he supposed to be like the little Muppet kid that comes in and makes everything like fun? Because it didn't work.
I'm actually going to tell you who he was based on because there was a lot of controversy about Scrappy that has...
Lasted through the decades?
Yes, that's a good way to put it.
Because, see, I don't
It's
even
still
remember
there.
him. And I've just got like ill
bad
will.
taste
I
in your
just have
mouth.
an ill will toward him.
Well, what I will tell you is there was an E! News online article published in honor of the anniversary of the first live-action movie. It came out in 2002.
Is this with Freddie and Sarah Michelle Gellar, who are now married? So Scooby-Doo.
They were a couple even
I
then.
know,
Yes.
but like Scooby has brought people together.
But this article that came out 2022 sheds a little light on how they chose. Do you remember that Scrappy was the villain in that movie?
I don't.
Yeah, Scrappy was the villain.
Feels right.
And so the movie was directed by Raja Gosnell, written by James Gunn, and it was simply called Scooby Doo. As you said, it starred...
You know who James Gunn is, right?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. Marvel, Guardians of the Galaxy.
It starred Freddie Prinze Jr. as Fred, Sarah Michelle Gellar as Daphne, Linda Cardellini as Velma, Matthew Lillard as Shaggy, and Neil Fanning was the voice of Scooby. It was very popular, although it did not receive great critical reviews. In fact, it grossed $275 million worldwide.
I think I remember seeing it, but I don't remember watching it multiple times. Like I saw it, but I'm just such a fan of the cartoon. It's hard to recapture that
the same magic.
spirit.
Yeah. The director said in an interview, quote, "One of the more controversial decisions was that we made Scrappy the villain." So he explained that he was a fan of the original series and that both he and the writer, James Gunn, had very strong feelings about Scrappy Doo. Quote, "Scrappy ruined the series.
He did.
It just seemed like the moment Scrappy came on, we were out. So it was just a brainstorm between James and I where we were trying to figure out the final twist. Just out of the session, it was like, Scrappy! Like, yes!" And so what they said was, they had such a passionate response to their choice of Scrappy being the villain. This I thought was interesting. The director went on to say, "I know people younger than us that really like Scrappy. So I think that was part of the controversy. Like, why did you do that to Scrappy?" But it was exactly like the character itself. The twist was widely debated depending on what era of Scooby you watched. But enough people hated Scrappy, so we were mostly applauded. Okay.
Enough people hated Scrappy.
So it brought it to my mind. I think it did depend on what age you were. Like, were you really little when Scrappy was first introduced and you loved him and you thought he was cute? Were you maybe a tiny bit older and you were used to the format they already had and you didn't like how he changed it? I think
whatever
it depended.
age was the non-scraps, that's me. That's what age I was in, because and this is my heart is always like, the person who's a voice actor, we don't hate you.
Right.
You know, I don't know who that even was, but you were doing your job and you were just saying the words that were on the page. I just don't like the character.
Right. I
Just
agree
don't
with
like
you.
him.
I agree with you. But a lot of people in these different articles, and these are opinion-based articles, mind you. I need to make sure I clarify that. But they have pointed out that Scrappy Doo has appeared very rarely anywhere since that 2002 movie. And so some people truly believe that Scrappy Doo as a character was basically ruined.
Wow.
Like, his reputation
Yeah.
was basically ruined after that movie. And anybody coming into the show after 2002 only sees him as a villain.
As a villain.
Yeah. Like, it has changed him in the canon, if you will. So
Maybe the where he should be. Maybe to where
maybe
he should
he
be.
deserved it.
Maybe he
So
deserved
there.
it. So
Yeah.
there.
Well, we're going to come back to him again, but for now, I thought that would be a fun way just to kind of start by getting your feelings about the big question.
They're very strong.
Yeah.
Turns out.
apparently. Yeah. So when I started researching Scooby Doo, I thought I was just moving into this light little children's program. I found out so many interesting things about the context in which this cartoon was born. In fact, one of the articles, just to give you an indication of what I was hit in the face with, one of the articles was entitled, "How Scooby Doo's Origins Are Related to the RFK Assassination."
What?
I know. So I thought this was very interesting. Several sources, not just one, talked about how important the time period was and what was happening when this show was being created, and or what led to its creation, if you will. In this article, Kevin Sander, who ends up going on to write a book about Scooby-Doo, said this: "Scooby Doo's invention was no happy accident. It was a strategic move in response to cultural shifts and political exigencies. The genesis of the series was inextricably bound up with the societal upheavals of 1968, in particular, the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy." I know, this was fascinating. Here's what I discovered. In the late 1960s, the television and film studio Hanna-Barbera was the largest producer of animated television programming. And for decades, they had been known for putting out really fun, lighthearted, slapstick-type shows like Tom and Jerry or the Yogi Bear Show, the Flintstones. But by the 1960s, the most popular cartoons that were coming out were the ones that were keying in on the big trends right then, like secret agents and spies, the space race, the popularity of superheroes. So this article said that 1966 was actually kind of this turning point in television animation when the three broadcast networks, because for the young people, this is prior to cable, and you had like three channels
that was
you could watch.
Yeah.
That's all you got.
Yeah.
So these three broadcast networks, CBS, ABC, and NBC, launched 9 new action-adventure cartoons for their Saturday morning lineup, 2 of the most popular being being Hanna-Barbera's Space Ghost and Dino Boy, and Filmation's The New Adventures of Superman. But basically, as they're creating these new shows, they're all filled with nonstop action and violence.
Oh, yeah.
And the heroes were like all working to try to defeat, even kill monsters or these really threatening bad guys by any means that they could. The next season, more of the same. As the same author phrased it, gone were the days of funny human and animal hijinks. In their place, terror, peril, jeopardy, and child endangerment.
That's a big shift.
It was, and the network executives saw that it was effective. They told the cartoon animators, keep giving us more of the same. They actually said, go stronger. We want more. They thought the more action and violence, the higher the ratings. Well, actually, their data told them that.
Yeah.
So they were telling these producers and these animators,
keep it going.
Let's go. Let's go. This is all we want. So Joe Barbera reflected later that the studios were telling them this, and they felt like they had to do it to stay in business. It was not like they wanted to do this. This was the direction they were headed. They had to do it. But as a result of these changes, the nonprofit corporation called the National Association for Better Broadcasting, they declared that year's children's television programming in March of 1968 to be the worst in the history of TV.
Ooh.
Yeah. So a lot of parents were calling for improvement in children's
Because it's
television.
too violent.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
They wanted improvement in kids' TV programming. One of these people calling for change was Robert F. Kennedy. He was the father of 11 kids. He was already in politics. In fact, according to the Smithsonian article, as Attorney General, he had worked with the Federal Communications Commission to improve what he referred to as the, quote, vast wasteland of children's television programming. So just hours after Robert Kennedy was shot, President Lyndon B. Johnson announced the appointment of a national commission on the causes and prevention of violence. His assassination was less than 5 years after his brother's assassination and only a few months after Martin Luther King Jr.'s. And basically, this article goes on to point out that there was a panic in the country over all the violence. There were civic groups that were speaking up. This is where the National Parent-Teacher Association was coming in. They were pushing for the broadcast networks to change their programming for children. People were very concerned, not just about TV, of course, just in general across society. And so this then caused the networks to feel the pressure. They were told, you need to turn away
You gotta
from
chill
all
out.
this. Exactly. So this is where they made their turn away from sci-fi, away from violent action. They decided they were moving more toward comedy, and that's what opened the door
for Scooby.
For Scooby Doo. So I'm going to tell you how the show was specifically created, but just to finish out this line of thought, the article points out that while Scooby Doo, Where Are You did have a lot of action and it had adventure. It wasn't like it didn't have that, but it said, quote, the characters are never in real peril or face serious jeopardy. There are no superheroes saving the world from aliens and monsters. Instead, a gang of goofy kids and their dog in a groovy van solve mysteries. The monsters they encounter are just humans in disguise. So that, in case you were thinking in your mind, well, wait a minute, there's all kinds of action and, you know, some scary things. But no, it all ends up being very safe. Very
like they
controlled,
said, I'd
very
have gotten away
goofy.
with it too if it wasn't for you kids.
Exactly.
You meddling kids.
So here's the origin story for Scooby.
Okay.
So in 1968, CBS executive Fred Silverman noticed how popular the Archie show was. And so it gave him that idea, just the first little nuggets of, maybe we should create another child-friendly cartoon that revolves around teenagers who are part of a rock group. So this is where it kind of starts percolating. Well, the Archie show, by the way, did not know this. I wonder if you do. It ended up having a smash hit song, Sugar, Sugar. Did you know that came from the cartoon?
Did. I was about to start singing it when you said that. It was the Archer.
Yes, I did not know it came from that. Well, a few other popular songs came from the show too, so obviously this would be something you might want to mimic. Well, he was also a fan of the I Love a Mystery radio show, which was a great mystery show that ran from 1939 to the mid-40s, focused on three friends who ran a detective agency and solved mysteries together.
Wouldn't that be the best career?
Can you imagine?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, he also loved The Many Loves of Dobie Gillis.
I like that too.
I've never seen it, but now I want to check it out.
It's so good.
Well, it ran from 1959 to 1963. It was a sitcom about a teenager looking for love, and one of his little sidekicks was this,
Maynard G. Krebs.
Yes, this beatnik.
Who was
Bob
Gilligan.
Denver.
Gilligan.
Yes, who went on to play Gilligan. Well, the other element we'd add to this, he also really liked the 1948 horror comedy movie Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. So his thought was to possibly kind of mash this up a
put
little
all
bit.
that together.
Yeah, incorporate elements from these different popular shows to see if he could create something new. Well, Fred took his idea to William Hanna and Joseph Barbera, the co-creators of Hanna-Barbera Productions. They then took this idea to their head story writers, Joe Ruby and Ken Spears. Their first version was a show called Mysteries 5 that would have 5 teens named Jeff, Mike, Kelly, Linda, and her brother WW, as well as their dog named Too Much. The band would have been named the Mysteries 5 because they all shared this strong interest in solving mysteries. Now, the artist who was in charge of creating the dog was Iwo Takamoto, same fella who created Astro in the Jetsons.
Aw.
He was the one who had to design this. Originally, they considered making the dog a Great Dane, but they basically rejected that idea
Isn't
right
Scooby
away.
a Great Dane?
Well, hang on.
Oh, okay.
They first rejected it because they thought, ooh, that might be too similar to Marmaduke.
Oh, yeah.
So they moved over to the idea of a sheepdog. And they
Oh.
played with that for a while
Yeah.
until they came back and said, wait a minute, there's a sheepdog in the Archies. It's going to look like we're copying them. That's when they went back to a Great Dane. Now, they had their idea. They put that together. They brought it to Fred Silverman, and he decided to change Jeff's name to Ronnie and to take out Mike's character altogether. He takes this presentation to the CBS network under the title, Who's Scared? And it was rejected.
Oh.
They thought it would be too scary for younger viewers. So he had to go back to Joe Ruby and Ken Spears and say, we need this to be funnier. This is when Ronnie became Fred, which was a nod toward Fred Silverman. They also renamed and revised their other characters at this time. They dropped the rock band idea. Scooby got his name at this time, which almost all the sources said came from Frank Sinatra's song Strangers in the Night.
Scooby-Dooby-Doo.
But the fella, Mark Evanier, who was a writer for Scooby Doo later, about the time Scrappy Doo came in, as a matter of fact, he said on his blog site that it was actually the song Denise by Randy and the Rainbows. That was at least part, if not all of the inspiration. There's a part where it's like, Denise, Denise. And it.
Oh, yeah.
You do hear Scooby Doo in
Yeah,
that.
you do.
Yeah, all the way through it.
You do.
So, one of the two. One of the two.
Interesting.
As for Scooby's character, in a notice written about the death of Joe Ruby, because he did pass away several years ago, it said that the creators often told people that Scooby's character was modeled on the character of Bob Hope, the character Bob Hope played in the Road movies alongside, alongside Bing Crosby.
Really?
Yes, because they said they really liked how Bob was this character who was very timid, very funny, but he could show temporary bravery when his friends were in trouble.
Danger. Gotcha.
Yes. So in that same article, it also said that the writers did a lot of work on that show before they finally realized, oh, hey, Scooby is actually the star of this show. Like
Absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Another point I saw about the artistic development of Scooby was that the same artist I've already mentioned, Mr. Takamoto, he researched the key features of a Great Dane and then purposely went against it. So, for example, if he saw that Great Danes have really strong chins and they stand very erect, he purposely
Gave him a recessed chin.
gave him like this bad posture and a very weak chin. Like, he literally went against
I love it.
to try to make it
Against
cute
type.
and funny. Yeah. The 4 human characters started out modeled after Dobie Gillis.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Maynard G. Krebs. Yes.
100%. And then they got revised and tweaked from there. We're going to go into a little bit more detail about this, but just basically.
That makes a lot of sense because Dobie Gillis was a blonde when it first started. I think they let him have his darker hair later. Maynard, yeah. And then his girl they probably changed her hair to red, right? Because the girl that he was in love with had blonde hair. And I think the girl that he ended up with had darker hair.
Well, I don't know the show like you do. So let's see if this answers your your question. Fred was based on Dobie, Velma on Zelda, Daphne on Talia, and Shaggy, as you've already said, was on Maynard.
Yeah.
Shaggy is the one whose final result really stayed pretty
close.
to the role model.
Yeah.
Like, he did have the goatee. He
Have
had
you seen
the
the picture of
clothing,
Maynard G?
Yes.
Yeah,
it's
it looks like
it's
him.
going to be in the show notes.
Oh, good.
Yeah, 100%. But they now had pinned down their new premise, which is that the show was going to be about 4 teenagers, along with their talking dog, driving around in a van called the Mystery Machine and solving mysteries.
I love it. I love
Yes.
everything about it. It's a winner.
Well, the final result was the beloved show we now know as Scooby Doo, Where Are You?, created again by Hanna-Barbera Productions for CBS Saturday morning cartoons, and it premiered on September 13th of 1969. The very first episode was entitled What a Night for a Night, which featured a moving suit of armor that ultimately turned out to be Mr. Wiggles.
Mr. Wiggles.
The seemingly innocent museum curator who was actually a secret art smuggler.
Of course he was.
Well, true to their goal of making sure that they were putting out appropriate, friendly programming for kids, the mysteries that the Scooby Gang ran across almost always started out seeming like it was going to be supernatural, maybe a ghost or a ghoul or a rampaging dinosaur. But then, of course, they would ultimately
Unmask
find out,
the villain.
Yep, it was all a disguise. It was hidden wires or phosphorescent paint or some kind of whatever that was being used to trick them. And it was just as human.
Yep.
Right. Several sources pointed out this was a very intentional way of trying to demystify scary things for children.
That's a good idea.
Yes. They said when you show them this fear that you have is really this simple explanation. It's not a scary thing at all that alleviates those concerns. So this is what they were trying to do. Well, the other pattern, you've already mentioned it. Everybody, of course, remembers that it always ended with unmasking the real villain who would then say something to the effect of,
And I would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you meddling kids. Did they say about the dog too? And that I don't think they did. They mention the dog?
I don't think they do.
Okay, so I
Yeah.
would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you meddling kids. And they would always say like Mr. Wiggles or something like that. Like it's like what?
So about the characters, obviously this was a program for children. There was not a great deal of character development. In fact, they were a little stereotypical in the roles they filled in their group. And it was also pointed out, which I'd never really noticed this, but the animation was really pretty simple.
Yeah, it
especially in
was.
those early days.
When they ran.
Yes, yes. And their facial expressions,
Yeah.
you didn't have a lot of detail
No.
in their faces. They would reuse sequences, like, you know, them running in this episode might look a lot like
They
them
flipped it.
running in that
Yeah.
episode. Exactly. So, yes, they took some of those shortcuts. Still worked beautifully,
Yeah,
I'm
it
going to
did.
say. But let's briefly talk about the different characters. So Fred, of course, was the blonde, fit, ascot-wearing, very logical character who was the leader of the group, basically. Frank Welker, a prolific voice actor, was the one who gave Fred his voice. He started with him in 1969 and continues to this day.
For real?
Yes, he does.
Wow.
Isn't that cool?
That is very cool.
Yeah. Daphne was the fashion-conscious redhead who in the early years often fit that little stereotype of the damsel in distress. But over the years, they have changed that.
And you know, every time I have this little purple dress, and I remember pairing it with a green sweater once, and I was like, yeah.
This works.
This works, Daphne. You're right. You're right.
Well, actress Stefaniana Christopherson originated the role of Daphne Blake in the first season of Scooby Doo, but Heather North took over in 1970 and continued until 1997. And then, of course, there have been other people since then. Now, Daphne had a catchphrase. Do you know what her catchphrase was?
I don't remember. What was it?
Jeepers.
Oh, no, that was Velma, wasn't it? Velma didn't say that? Ah, interesting.
We'll talk about Velma next.
Okay.
Velma, of course, wore...
Jinkies. No, Velma said Jinkies.
Yes, she
That's
did.
It.
That was her,
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Velma had her turtleneck. She wore glasses, and she was, of course, the little stereotype of the brain. She was the brain of the group. Nicole Jaffe originally voiced Velma from 1969 to 1974, and I did note a few of her successors because one of them you're going to recognize. Some of the other people who have voiced Velma over the years have included Pat Stevens, Marla Frumpkin, B.J. Ward, Mindy Cohn, and Kate Mikuchi, Mindy Cohn from The Facts of Life.
Oh, Natalie.
Yes.
Yeah.
So she was Jinkies. That was her catchphrase. We've talked about Shaggy quite a bit already. He, of course, was the always hungry, very laid-back slacker, wearing his bell-bottoms and a t-shirt, who was always cowardly when faced with danger.
Also identify with Shaggy there. Fashion choices, everything. Hungry. Yep. We got it. We got it,
check,
Shag.
check. Casey Kasem, who hosted
Yes, I knew
American
that.
Top 40, voiced Shaggy from 1969 to 1997, and his catchphrase was zoinks.
Oh, yeah.
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 Zoinks. Zoinks. So Scooby, again, we've said quite a bit about him, but here's an observation I saw in one of my sources that I thought was a bit insightful. Quote, Scooby is inseparable from Shaggy and in many ways indistinguishable. Same appetite, same poltroonery, same plot functions. Essentially, split aspects of the same character. The two are not id and superego, but something closer to id and more id.
Yeah,
I
that's
thought
true.
that was interesting. They
Yeah.
are so similar.
They are.
Yeah. Well, Don Messick was the original voice of Scooby Doo. He was also the voice of Astro, the family dog, on the series The Jetsons. And since his passing, several other people have voiced Scooby, including Dave Coulier, who played Uncle Joey on Full House.
Nice.
And his catchphrase is,
Ruh-roh.
yes.
Ruh-roh.
Pearl.
Ruh-roh, Scoob.
But Fred did not have a catchphrase. I could not find one for him. And then I saw where people were writing in saying, why doesn't Fred have a catchphrase? And then some people were saying, you know what he often said was, let's split up, gang.
That's it. Yep.
When it
Let's
was
split
time
up,
to
gang.
go
And he always
hunt.
picked Daphne.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, Fred.
Well, I mean, yeah. And some people said that he also said, hold the phone.
Did he?
When he was surprised. I don't remember
I
that.
don't remember that. That
that
seems too modern for Fred.
Yeah. Well, according to IMDb, the originators have been quoted as saying that Fred and Shaggy are each 17 years old.
Oh.
Daphne is 16 and Velma is 15.
They some young babies.
I
I
know.
would have put them in their 20s.
never
But I
had
guess
that.
it was 4 teenagers. So, but yeah, they were very mature.
Yeah, I never would have said that. I never
Velma
would
was
have gotten that.
15? Is that what they said? 15?
She was the youngest. Yeah. And one last note before we go to break. A typical storyline involves Daphne getting kidnapped or otherwise endangered.
Poor Daph.
Fred devising some spectacular but unsuccessful trap to try to ensnare the villain, and then the case being wrapped up by a blend of Velma's smarts and Shaggy and Scooby's bumbling good luck.
Yeah.
I was like, that's a pretty good little summary.
That is a good summary.
I know. And on that note, let's take a little break.
There's not much we love more than spilling the tea with you every Tuesday. So, we've decided to start every month by thanking a few of our supporters who help make this possible.
Along with the fun, producing a weekly podcast also brings with it more time and expense than you might expect. Your financial generosity in becoming a member through Buy Me a Coffee, a very simple link found on our website, allows us to keep creating these episodes.
We'd like to extend our deepest gratitude to 2 of our current members, Rebecca and Sherry. As a thank you to them and to anyone else who supports Scandal Water by becoming a member on Buy Me a Coffee, these ladies will receive perks like discounts on merch and access to exclusive bonus content, such as our minisodes.
We'll be back the first week of next month to acknowledge and celebrate more members. If you'd like to hear your name on that list, visit us at www.scandalwaterpodcast.com.
Until then, we lift our cup to you, Rebecca and Sherry.
Cheers. And we are back to talk more Scooby.
Scoobs!
Yay. So I thought I would walk through a little bit of a timeline, and I need to credit my source for this. They laid it out so nicely. It was a Closer Weekly article that went through. I am not going to name them all.
Okay.
So nobody get offended if I
Nobody
leave
write
out
in.
your favorite. I'm gonna mention a lot of them.
Okay.
And it's gonna be fast. But this will be just a quick little walk through the changes in Scooby Doo over the years. All right. We've already talked about the original Scooby Doo. Where Are You? 1972 to 73, we had Scooby Doo, the new Scooby Doo movies. This is where Scooby and the gang started interacting with fictional characters, sometimes real life actors, or a combination of the two in order to solve mysteries. So if you remember episodes where they had Batman, Genie from I Dream of Jeannie, the Addams Family, Don Knotts, Tim Conway, Dick Van Dyke, Sonny and Cher, it might have been from this time period.
I feel like
right
I remember
here.
the Harlem Globetrotters being on it
Definitely.
too.
I'm not sure which one. Might have been that one. But now there's another one they could have appeared in as well. So we'll keep going. The Scooby Doo show was 1976 to 78. And this was the very first time we got to meet Scooby's cousins, Scooby Dum and Scooby Dee. Now, here we go. Scooby Doo and Scrappy Doo, 1979 to 1984. Now, again, I went back to this writer for Scooby Doo, Mark Evanier. He has a really nice little personal blog site where he gives a lot of background information. So
he's like, here's why we did it, guys.
Yeah, I'm reading this straight from his words.
All right,
straight from the source.
Let's have it.
Scrappy debuted on the Scooby Doo program in 1979 as a new element. Scooby had been on the air for some time by then, and the narrow formula of the series had become repetitive to the point where ABC was considering cancellation.
Aww.
One of the very real concerns was whether the writers could come up with the 13 requisite ghost premises to do another 13 episodes. In setting the schedule for that year, it had come down to a decision between renewing Scooby or picking up a new series. The pilot script for which I'd written from another studio. Joe Barbera called me in and said approximately, if this doesn't work, Scooby's dead. We have this new character that I came up with. And he showed me the sketches of Scrappy Doo explaining that this was Scooby's nephew. We would add him to the show and this would just make things fresh enough while still keeping the winning Scooby formula intact. They were hoping this would be enough for ABC to order 13 more episodes. As Mr. Barbera told me how he saw Scrappy Doo, I kept thinking of Henry Hawk. Barbera never said that name and may not have even realized he was describing the pint-sized chicken hawk from several Warner Brother epics. But that's what it sounded like they wanted. So I went home and wrote a short scene imagining Scrappy to have Henry Hawk's voice and swagger, and when Mr. B read it, he called and said, "You've nailed it." That's exactly what I had in mind. That's who it was.
That's who it was.
See, I was
also an irritating character, may I say.
Yes. See, I was like, when I read that, I was just like,
oh, there it is.
Yeah. I thought that was fascinating,
It
though.
is.
And I also think it makes me a little bit more sympathetic realizing they were going to cancel Scooby. Like, this was their attempt to freshen things up. Well, and I will also say that the same fella, Mark, he said, you know, there's a lot of hate now for Scrappy. He goes, people loved it. Really? Scrappy was actually very, very popular for quite some time.
Well, if Henry Hawk was popular, Scrappy would be popular.
Yeah. So there were several different shows involving Scrappy Doo over that next course of like 5 years.
Because he wasn't on there all the time, right?
Right.
And then every time he was on, I was like, oh, Scrappy's in this one.
Well, the first series that aired in 1979, the Scooby and Scrappy Doo show, included the entire gang. The format of the next series, called the Richie Rich / Scooby Doo show, was basically featuring Scooby, Scrappy, and Shaggy chasing down monsters, which could be real or fake.
Okay.
Daphne, Velma, and Fred were gone from that version altogether.
Did they go to college or something?
I don't know how they explained it, but they weren't there. The next series was called the Scooby and Scrappy Doo Puppy Hour, and it was very similar, except that they added the element of Shaggy's uncle, Fearless, who was sending them out on different cases. The next one was the new Scooby and Scrappy Doo show, which brought back Daphne and then added more of the mystery stuff in from basically back to the original concept. And then finally, the new Scooby Doo Mysteries added Fred and Velma back as guest stars and had more 2-part episodes. So that was kind of the spell where we saw a lot of Scrappy. Okay. Now, The 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo was 1985. Vincent Price came in playing Vincent Van Ghoul, who teamed up with the Scooby Gang as they traveled around the world attempting to capture 13 different terrifying ghosts. It ran for a single season, but it was canceled before they caught the last ghost.
No!
Yes. And by the way, this is a big change because these are definitely paranormal creatures through this particular show. And this was also when they added a new character called Flim Flam.
Flim Flam? I don't remember them.
I think I do, and I don't think I liked it.
Okay.
I don't think I was a huge Flim
Flim Flam
fan. A Pup Named Scooby-Doo was 1988 to 91.
I remember that.
They were elementary school age little kids.
Yep.
Yes. Did you like that or not?
I don't remember. Was Scrappy on it?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I
do remember. And that's also when they did like Muppet Babies and they made everybody tiny. It was all in that area.
They said it was a big thing at that. Yeah, miniature size and young was kind of a big trend right
What'd you say it was 88?
88 to 91.
Okay, I'd have been 8 to 11.
And they solved mysteries in their tree Treehouse Detective Agency. Yeah.
So, while other people were out listening to the grunge and stuff of the 90s, I'm watching a pup named Scooby Doo. You want to know what I was doing?
Now we know.
Now we know.
Now we
And
know.
Muppet Babies.
So then they had, now this was kind of across a time period, but they had a lot of Scooby-Doo animated movies coming out in the late 80s. The first was the 1987 Scooby-Doo Meets the Boo Brothers, and then they went on from there. They had Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, Scooby-Doo and the Witches Goes,
I
Scooby-Doo
don't
and the
remember any
Alien
of those, so I
Invaders.
must not have seen that.
Well, I think they went on through the 90s, if I
Okay.
recall. Yeah. And we'll come back to that because I'm going to tell you a story about that. Scooby-Doo movie, we've already said. This was the first live-action movie, 2002. It starred, I've already gone through the stars. Of course, as you've already said, Freddie Prinze and Sarah Michelle Gellar were already a couple. It read as though they were already married, but I'm not sure.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
But I could be wrong.
And it was so popular, even though, as we've said, the reviews were not great, it was still popular enough that they came back 2 years later with a Scooby-Doo 2, Monsters Unleashed. But because the box office was so disappointing for that one, they canceled their plans to make the third one.
Was it the same people?
I think it was.
Really? I don't remember that
Yeah,
one.
I think so. In more recent years, they have continued to make more Scooby-Doo spin-offs and movies and versions. I'm not going to name them all, but I'm just going to quickly list a few. What's New Scooby-Doo, 2002 to 2006. Shaggy and Scooby Get a Clue, 2006 to 2008. Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, 2010 to 13. Be Cool Scooby-Doo, 2015 to 18. Daphne and Velma in 2018. Scooby-Doo and Guess Who, 2019. Scoob in 2020. The series Velma is still currently in production. It goes on
Wow.
and on and on.
Very influential.
Yes, that is a great comment to segue us into this little section on the impact.
Okay.
TV Guide named Scooby-Doo the fifth greatest TV cartoon of all time in 2013. Now, I know the numbers are now higher, but a 2020 Atlantic article said at that time that Scooby-Doo has been the subject of more than 19 TV series, more than 40 animated films, and at that point, 2 live-action movies.
That's incredible.
It has also spawned video games, comic books, a touring live show, and lots of merchandise. It's 55 years after its premiere. It is still going. A Smithsonian article commented that Scooby-Doo grew, quote, into one of the most lucrative franchises in the history of animation, making the reputations, but not the fortunes, of its creators, Ken Spears and Joe Ruby, because a sad note is those fellas did not make much at all off their creation. It explained in the Washington Post.
Was it a work for hire?
Yes, because it was basically, you did this for your company. They own it, not you.
Yeah.
In fact, those 2 creators ultimately left and started a studio of their own.
They should.
Yeah. So that same Atlantic article made this observation. Over the past 50 years, the Scooby-Doo characters have become almost archetypal Joseph Campbell-worthy portraits of teenagerdom. Watch just about any ensemble teen show or movie, and you'll find your Freds and Daphnes and your Velmas and Shaggies. Perhaps no one applied this paradigm more self-consciously than the writer-director Joss Whedon in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which winked at its predecessor by imagining a group of teen monster fighters led by a superhero version of Daphne. Buffy and her pals even referred to themselves as the Scoobies. Whedon later claimed, tongue only partly in cheek, all great fiction is Scooby-Doo-like.
Oh, it's the 5-man band. You write a story about the 5 different, although we talked about Shaggy and Scooby being kind of
The same.
The same,
Yeah.
but it's the 5. You got the heart, the brain, the muscle.
Yeah.
I forget what the others are called, but it's the 5 men. You have these 5 characters, and they fit it.
And then you are able to cover everything you want to cover. Yeah. If you think about it in terms of appealing to your audience, then you're also relating. Everybody has somebody to relate to.
Yeah. And what they also did is they gave them each an outfit. So if you wanted to dress like one of them, they wore the same thing all the time.
That's
So you
true.
can dress like Daphne. You can dress like I said, I had a purple dress and a green sweater. I was like, I'm Daphne. You just feel like them.
Armchair psychologist.
Well, in terms of our armchair, I feel like we started to just naturally go there. We started talking about why it's worked. Why are people still with it 55 years later? And one of the things that struck me was it has crossed generations. I mean, I loved the mystery aspect of it. I loved that show. I mean, again, there were certain iterations, like with Scrappy Doo, that I did not.
Yeah.
But I loved it when it was about mysteries and
Yeah.
solving mysteries.
Yep.
I thought that was perfect.
Yep.
And my kids did watch it. In fact, that's where I'm going to go back to. I even remember, I think it was Scooby Doo and the Witch's Ghost. We showed that to Camden when he was too little to see it. Because it was Scooby Doo. You thought it was
yeah.
fine. And he only told us, like, I don't even know, in the last 5 to 10 years that it scared him to
Freaked
death.
him out.
Yes. But my kids saw it. And then Kennedy has this bestie named Morgan. They have been best friends since, I'm not even kidding you, I think it was 6th grade. Morgan is just a doll. She's a sweetheart, and she is a great mama. In fact, you guys heard them. They're the ones who did the shout out at the beginning of our Derby episode.
Oh, yes, that was so cute.
Yes, her toddler Mia is just adorable. But anyway, I sent a text and I asked, just out of curiosity, has Mia seen any Scooby Doo? And she responded that she absolutely has, except Morgan said she doesn't really like the new animation. Yeah. She shows her old stuff.
Oh,
she
Morgan doesn't like the new stuff. She goes back to the OGs.
As a parent,
Yeah.
she goes back and she finds the stuff that she likes, and that's what she's showing
And
to
that's
Mia.
how it lives on.
Exactly. So I think one of the reasons that it's so enduring is that it is cross-generational. But again, I will even say, even though we're critical of certain shows or certain characters, I dare say there are people who would call out loving the very ones we hate. So the fact that they have had different versions and different iterations probably is part of why they endure, because people connect sometimes to this particular show when they didn't like that one, maybe.
And I also wonder if it's a thing of generational. So when Scooby first came out, there wasn't a lot of choices. So you had these people who loved it because there wasn't a lot to choose from. So they latched onto Scooby and loved it and watched it, then introduced it to their children, who then it's like this growing up. Like Disney does this thing where they have Disney kids and they grow them into Disney adults because they want you to bring your children back to Disney and just keep replenishing the pool. So I think when you had early on, you didn't have those choices. You love it. You're like, oh, and you have so much nostalgia for it, and you show it to your kids, which is probably why the OGs get so much attention, because those are the ones that the original set got attracted to.
Absolutely, I think that could be true. But I've done a little analysis since I've obviously been spending some time on this and thinking about it a lot. I think it's partly because of my true crime personality.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
I think that I was...
Or do you think that Scooby ignited your true crime personality?
I think I've always had it. I really do. But I think Scooby fed right into it. He probably fanned the flames. But I mean, as a young child, first of all, teenagers are always cool. Like if you're young, teenagers are cool.
Yeah.
So the fact that dogs are cool.
Yeah, they are.
I mean, come on. So you had the teenagers. You had a dog, a talking dog.
A talking dog.
They're driving around.
It's a talking dog.
Right. And I mean, I was always drawn to things that were kind of spooky. So they were like, it was always dark. It was always like sounds, or it's gonna be a ghost. I mean, like, I love stuff like that.
I feel like it's in the same category as Nancy Drew.
It absolutely. Absolutely. And I loved Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys. And then I got to solve a mystery. I mean, I would try to figure out who's it going to be. It was satisfying. It was so satisfying every single time it got solved. And these kids got credit. Kids got credit for solving it. I think it was a beautiful formula. And I think that's part of why I resented some of these later versions that were just fluff.
Yeah.
They were just fluff.
Yeah,
it was
don't
like,
insult our intelligence.
You're just running around acting silly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I loved it. And I'm going to tell you something else I loved.
What?
Did you ever see or hear about, you probably didn't watch this show, so you probably have not, the Supernatural Scooby Doo crossover?
No.
Oh.
Is it adorable?
Goodness. Okay, I did not finish this series, but I did watch the show Supernatural for probably several years, so I knew the characters really well, and there's some cute characters. You know, they're two brothers. You've got Sam and Dean, the very distinctive personalities. They're chasing after paranormal things, supernatural things, and so I knew those characters really well, liked them really well.
Our friend Lizzie loves it too.
When I knew that they were doing the Scooby Doo crossover episode, I had to watch it, even though I had stopped watching that series quite some time before. I love that episode. It is the cutest. Yes. And so that's another props to them, is that they do things like that to bring in
More
pop
people.
culture, or to think about their audience and, okay, how do we appeal to kids, but how can we also bring in the adults?
I know, now I want a Scooby shirt. Talking about merch and stuff, I want to go look and see if I can find a Scooby shirt.
I love it. Well, I think that brings us to the close. I thought I would end with this very, very short quote from Hank Stuever of the Washington Post, and he once summed up the cartoon's message in this way, quote, "Kids should meddle, dogs are sweet, life is groovy, and if something scares you, you should confront it."
Oh,
That's
I
what-
like that.
Yeah, that's what he says the message is. So I think we end with a big cheers to our two fellas who created
yeah.
it. Yeah. So a big cheers to Joe Ruby and Ken Spears. Boy, did you guys touch
phenomenon.
history. Yeah. Cheers to you.
Cheers.
If you love what we do, please rate and review our show. Or you can become a supporter by making a donation through buymeacoffee.com/scandalwaterpod. Whether a single gift or a recurring monthly donation, it would go a long way towards supporting our work and allowing us to keep the tea brewing.
At our website, www.scandalwaterpodcast.com, you can submit questions or your own story ideas, access our sources and show notes, see the merch we offer for sale, and more. You can join the Scandal Water community through our Scandal Water Podcast Facebook page, or follow us on Instagram or TikTok at Scandal Water Podcast.
This episode was executive produced by Candy Thomas, that's me, and Ashley Raymer Brown.
That's me.
It was researched and written by Candy Thomas and edited by Ashley Raymer Brown.
A special thank you to Josh Martin, who wrote, composed, and performed the Scandal Water theme and other music. Matt C. Adams, who created the artwork, and Joshua Reith, who designed our website and provides ongoing technical support.
As a reminder, this podcast is purely for entertainment purposes. The thoughts and opinions of the host during each episode of Scandal Water are their own and do not reflect the opinions of any future guests, advertisers, or clearly professional psychologists. Thanks for listening.